So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our today's class, MA Section 2, Activity-Based Costing. So we want to revise on activity-based costing. Initially, we had indicated that we're going to do inventory, but we'll do it next time. So today we want to do what we call activity-based costing. We want to look at questions on activity-based costing, very important. This is under topic cost accumulation. Cost accumulation. The topic is cost accumulation, activity-based costing. So activity-based costing is under what we call cost accumulation. So it is concerned about determining the cost of the overhead. So we're determining the cost of overhead based on the activity. So there are two ways in which you can be able to determine the cost of overheads. We call it the traditional way and the activity-based costing. We're going to do questions on the same, and I hope you'll be able to follow. So the first question you're going to do, is May 2007. So the first one is May 2007, question number 3. May 2007, question number 3. May 2007, question number 3. So the first question is May 2007, question number 3 on activity-based costing. May 2017, sorry, 2017, question number 3. This is the question, the first question we're going to do on activity-based costing. On activity-based costing. So May 2017, question number. May 2017, question number 3. The question reads, question number 3B. Question number 3B. The question reads, ABC Limited plans to use activity-based costing to determine its product cost. Currently, it uses a single plant-wide factory overhead rate for allocating factory overheads to products based on direct labor hours. So the total factory overhead cost is as follows: production support, and then production in bracket factory overhead only 175,000. The company has determined that it performs 4 major activities in the production support department. These activities, along with their budgeted costs, are as follows: setup 428,750, production quality 245,000, quality control 103,750, material management 367,500, total 1,225,000. ABC Limited has estimated the following activity-based usage quantities and units produced for each of its 3 products. So we have product K, L, M. Then you have been given a number of units, direct labor hours. So required, determine the factory overhead cost per unit for each of the following. Determine the factory overhead cost per unit. Determine the factory overhead cost per unit for each product using single plant-wide factory overhead rate method and activity-based. Determine the factory overhead cost per unit for each product using the single plant-wide factory overhead rate method and activity-based costing. Activity-based costing. So single plant-wide factory overhead rate. So here we have single plant-wide factory overhead rates. Overhead rate. Single plant-wide factory overhead rates. So that one we said you have overhead absorption rate here, it will be overheads over the base. So the overheads is going to be, the total overheads you have been given is, the total overhead is, total cost is 1,400,000. 400,000. The total overhead is 1,400,000. That is the total overhead, 1,400,000. And you've been told under the single wide, factory wide, under the single wide means we have one absorption rate to absorb overheads. Some of us might not be aware what it means by absorption of overheads. So we said when you're determining, let me give you an example here. For instance, you can have two products here. When you're determining the total cost of a product, the total cost of a product is composed of three elements. That is material cost, labor cost, and overheads. So here we have material cost. We have material cost. For instance, this one will be 5,000. And then here we can have 5,000 again. And then here we have labor cost. Labor cost. Then here can be 10,000, and there can also be 10,000. And then overheads. So when it comes to overhead, we estimate what are the overheads. Overheads are indirect costs that cannot be traced in the final product. So it's not possible to determine the value of overheads at the start of the process of making a product. The two elements, which is material and labor, you can be able to determine them. You can be able to tell how much you're going to spend on material when you're making a particular product. It's also possible for you to tell the amount of money that you're going to spend on labor. So those two items, those two elements, the total cost elements are able to be known in advance. But for the overheads, we don't have ability to know in advance until at the end of the process. So now what happens is that we estimate. So there are two ways in which we can be able to estimate the cost of overhead. We are saying we have what we call, you determine one overhead rate. So one overhead rate, the overhead rate is equal to the overheads, the estimated overheads over the days. So for instance, now in the example I've given here, maybe the estimated overhead to be 10,000. This is the estimated overhead or the historic overhead. And then now our method of absorption to be on based on labor, based on the material, based on the labor cost. So you add the total labor cost of the two products, which now here will be 20,000. If their cost, you multiply by 100. So here, our absorption rate or our estimation rate will be 50% of the labor cost. So here it will be 5,000 for overhead, and then here 5,000. So we can either use, the base can either be labor cost. If it is labor cost, it will be the overheads, the estimated overhead, over the total labor cost of all the products involved. It can be material cost, it will be the overhead over the total material cost times 100. It can be labor hours. If it's labor hours, it's overhead over the total labor hours. We don't multiply by 100. It can be machine hours. So those are the methods of absorbing overhead. So to absorb overhead means to estimate the overhead cost in order to complete the product cost. So in our question here, they wanted us to determine the single plant-wide factory overhead rate method. Single plant-wide factory overhead rate method. So now the total overhead now in our question is 1,400,000. And we have been told they are using the labor hours to absorb overheads. Currently, to use a single plant-wide factory overhead rate for allocating factory overheads to product based on direct labor hours. So here, the total direct labor hours, which is 175,000, this is provided for. 175,000, that one will be the single. So the absorption rate, when you multiply there, so you get it is shillings 8 per hour. Shillings 8 per hour. So that is a single determine the factory overhead cost per unit. Factory overhead cost per unit. Factory overhead cost per unit. So now it will, the overhead absorption rate will be 8 shillings per hour. 8 shillings per hour. And then now here, so we have product K. We have product K. We have product K, product L, and product M. So overhead cost. So the overhead cost here, for this one, overhead cost per unit. Overhead cost per unit. Overhead cost. The total overhead here, it will be 8. You multiply 8 times the total labor hours for product. So the first one here, it will be 8. It will be 8. That is the rate. You multiply the total labor hours that were there for product K, which is 25,000. So this one times 8. So this will be 200,000. This is the total overhead cost here. 200,000. For the whole, that is 200,000. And then the other one, it is 8. 8, you multiply by 10,000. So this one, 80,000. And the other one, it is 140,000 times 8. So this is 1,220,000. So that will be the overhead cost. So the overhead cost per unit. So this one, it is 200,000. You divide by the number of units here. The number of units K, it is 10,000 units. So you divide here by 10,000 units. And then this one, you divide by 2,000 units. And here you divide by 50,000 units. So you get the cost per unit. So this one is going to give you 200,000 divided by 10,000. So this one is going to give you shillings 20 per, that is the overhead cost per unit. Overhead cost per unit. So this one is going to give you shillings 40 per unit. This one is going to give you shillings 22.4 per unit. So that one will give you the overhead cost per unit. So we go to the activity-based costing. Activity-based costing. Activity-based costing. So here we need to compute what we call cost driver rates. Cost driver rates, which is equals to overhead over the cost driver. So the first activity here, the first activity we have, it's what we call setup. So the first one here is called setup. So setup, it's going to be setup is going to be overhead over number of setups, which is going to be the overhead for setup. So each and every activity is allocated its overhead when it comes to activity-based costing. When it comes to single-wide, all the overheads are given as a single block figure. But when it comes to activity-based costing, each and every activity is allocated its overheads. So the overhead allocated for setup is 428,750. 428,750. And then we divide by the number of setups. Number of setups is 125. So 125, which is 34 shillings, 34.30. So this one will give you 34.30. That is setup. Number two, we have the next activity is production control. Production control is going to be, so production control. So we have the next one is production control. Number two here, we have production control. Production control, which is going to be overhead over production control. We're going to use number of production control. We're going to use production orders here. So you're going to use production orders. So remember these overheads that I'm indicating here, these are budgeted overheads allocated as per activity. So production control, so this one is going to give you 245,000, and then you divide by number of production control 125. So here you get the total, which is 1960 per order. So this give you shillings 1960 per order. So the next item after production control is quality control. Quality control. Quality control, we have overheads. We'll have the overheads over inspections, number of inspection. So this one is going to be overhead is 183,750. Number of inspection is 75. So number of inspection is 75. So 183,750. You divide by 75. So that one is going to give you 2450 per inspection. So this one is going to be shillings 27. It's going to give you 2750 per inspection. 2750, 2450 per inspection. So this one is going to be 2450 per inspection. Number four, we have material management. We have material management. So it's the formula going to be overhead over material requisition, number of material requisitions. So which is going to be, the overhead allocated there is 367,500 over 750. So that one is going to give you 490 per requisition. So this is shillings 490. And lastly here, we have what we call production overheads. So we have production overheads here, the last one. Production overheads, which is going to be overhead over labor hours here. So we have been told here is labor hours. So overhead over labor hours. That is the production total budgeted labor hours. So 125, it's 175,000. It's going to be 175,000 over the total labor hours is, sorry, the total production here is 175,000 over the total labor hours is 175,000. So this is going to give you 1 shillings. It's going to give you 1 shillings per labor hours. So this is 1 shilling, shillings 1. So when you're doing activity-based costing, overheads are absorbed based on the activities, based on the cost driver of the activity. So each and every activity will be allocated the overheads. So you need to determine the cost driver rates, the rate at which you're going to absorb the overheads. So each and every activity will have its overhead, and then you need to determine the cost driver. The cost driver is that factor that causes the overhead to occur. Like for instance, setup, it will be the number of setups. So you're going to divide the overhead of a particular activity and the cost driver. The cost driver is the influencer of cost, that generates cost, that item that influences cost. So you're going to determine the cost driver rates the way we have done. And then now once you have the cost driver rates, you can now be able to determine, we don't need this press now. You can now be able to determine the overhead allocation sheet. So you can now be able to determine the total overhead. So we have product K, we have product K, we have product L, and we have product M. So here we're going to determine the total overhead first. So the first one here, it will be set up. These are just overheads. These are overheads. Overheads according to activity. So the setup here, we're going to multiply the total number of setups, which is for product K is 80. You're going to multiply here 80. You multiply by 34. You multiply by 34, 30. So 80 times 34, 30. You're going to multiply 80 times 34, 30. 80 times 34, 30. 80 times 34, 30. 80 times 3430. So that one is going to give you to 274,400. So this one is going to be 274,400. This is the total overhead for setup for product K. Product L, we're going to multiply the number of setup, which is 40. We are going to multiply by 3430. 40 times 3430. So that one will give you 137,200. So this one will be 137,200. And then M, you're going to multiply 3430 times the number of setups, which is 5. That one will give you 17,150. So this one will give you 17,150. That is setup. We go to production control. Production control. Production control. So it's going to be 1960 times number of production orders times 80. 1960 times 80. 1960 here. 1960, 80 times 1960. 80 here times 1960. What is 80? 80 is the number of orders for production for product K, and 1960 is the absorption rate. It's absorption rate as determined according to the activity. So that one will give you 178. That one will give you 156,800. So this one will be 156,800. 156,800. 156,800. And then we go to the next one, which is 40 times 1960. That one will give you 78,400 here, 78,400 here. So we have multiplied 40 times 1960. The next one, we're going to multiply 5. Where am I getting this 80, 40? They are there provided in the question. So they are provided in the question. So if you don't have the question, make sure that you can liaise with us so that we can send you the question. So that you can enjoy the classes. You need to have the question papers with you so that you can enjoy the revision. So the last one is 5, and then we are multiplied by the 1960. 5, we multiply by the 1960. That one is going to give you 4,800. 4,800. 4,800. And then we go to the quality control. Quality control. Quality control. The first one, under the quality control, you're going to multiply the number of inspection times 2450. So this one will be 2450 times 35. That one is going to be 2450 times 35. 2450 times 35. 2450 times 35. 2450 times 35, which is 85,750. So this one is going to be 85,750. And then the next one is going to be 40 times 2450. 40 times 2450, that one is going to be 98,000. So this one is going to be 98,000. And the next one is the next one is 0 times 2450, which is 0. So this one will be 0. We go to material management. Material management. Material management. Material management. So material management, we are going to take 490, and then we are going to multiply by the material requisition. So 490 here, 490, you multiply by 320. 490 multiplied by 320. 490 times 320. 490 times 320. That one will give you 156,800. So this one will be 156,800. The next one will be 490 times 400. 490 times 400. This one will be 196,000. And the next one is 490 times 30. 490 times 30, that one will give you 14,700. So this one will be 14,700. material management. And then we have production overhead. Production overhead, the last one. The last one is production overhead. It is 1 times 25,000. So this one will be 25,000. And this other one will be 10,000. And this other one will be 140,000. So you add them together. So you add them together, you get the total cost. You get the total cost of those. You get the total cost. So the total cost here, the total overhead cost, this is the total overhead cost only. The question required us to do the total overhead cost. This is 519,600, and this is 181,650. So those are the total overhead costs. So they wanted the cost per unit. So here the cost per unit, the cost per unit. So this one you get 698,750, and then you divide by 10,000 units. You divide by the total number of units here, and then this is 519,600. You divide by the total number of units, which is 2,000, and this is 181,650. You divide by total cost here was total units 50,000. So here you get it is shillings 69.875. And here it will be shillings 259.8. And lastly, it will be the last one. The last one is going to be 181,650 divided by 50,000. So this one will give you 3.633. So that one will be the final answer. Any question? If you have a question, you can post it so that we can answer. So this one, the question required us to determine the overhead cost per unit based on the activity-based costing. So in other words, you absorb overhead based on the activity. You compute the cost driver rates, which you compute the cost driver rate. For instance, the setup, you take the total overhead of the setup over the total, the cost driver is the number of setup over the total number of setup of all the products. And then you get the cost driver rates. So for each product, you're going to multiply that absorption rate by the number of the cost driver. For each individual cost driver, you get the overhead for that particular activity. Now you share. And then eventually you get the total cost, you divide. So that is any question? Any questions so far? So there being no question, we're going to do another question on the same to reinforce what you've been. May 2011, we're going to do May 2011 question number 2B. May 2011 question number 2B. So we're doing revision on activity-based costing. May 2011 question number 2B. May 2011 question number 2B. May 2011 question number 2B. May 2011, question number 2B. May 2011, question number 2B. So we are doing May 2011, question number 2B, activity-based costing. So the question reads, Muungano Limited manufactures 4 products branded A, B, and C, D. So the company operates the traditional absorption costing system. The production manager has suggested that the company should adopt the activity-based costing system in determination of a cost per unit. So the following information relates to for the month of April 2011, you've been given the machine hour per unit, direct labor per unit, direct material per unit. Additional information. The products are manufactured in production runs of 10 units and are sold in batches of 20 units. That is additional information. Number 1, the overheads are absorbed using the machine hour rate. Number 2, and number 3, the quantities produced during the months were 2,400 units, 2,000 units, 1,600 units, and 2,400 units for product A, B, C, and D respectively. Number 4, the requisition raised during the months were 20 units for each product, while the orders executed were in batches of 10 units for each product. Number 5, overheads for the month of production were as follows. So machining, machine hours, the total overhead is 417,200. Setup number of production runs, which is 210,000. Store receiving requisition raised 144,000. And inspection number of production runs 84,000. Material handling orders executed 184,800. Required the unit and the total cost of each product using the traditional absorption costing system, that is Roman 1, and Roman 2, the unit and the total cost for each product using the activity-based costing system. So here they want us to use the traditional method. So Roman 1 here, we're going to traditional stroke conventional absorption method. Traditional stroke conventional traditional. So here we have overhead absorption rate, which is equals to overheads over the base. So here we've been told the overheads. So you add the total overheads. The total overheads will be 417. The total overhead here is going to be 417,200 plus 210,000 plus 144,000 plus 84,000 plus 184,800. So that is the total overhead, and then the base, that is the total overheads. That is the total overheads. Remember here we are using the base here is going to be, we have been told the base. Okay, let me wrap this one first of all to write the formula. Let me wrap this one first. So the base we have been told is the machine hours. So it's going to be overheads over the machine hours. The machine hours. So the total overheads here, total overheads is going to be, you're going to add 417,200 plus 210,000 plus 144,000 plus 84,000 plus 184,800. So this one is going to be the total overheads. So the total overheads will be, that was going to be the total overhead, which is the total overheads, which is 1040,000. So this one going to be to give it. This is going to give you 1040,000. And then the machine hours. We're going to get the total machine hours. So we have been told in the question that product A requires 8 machine hours per unit. So 8, the total number of units that were produced is 2,400. Each product requires 8 machine hours. So that one will be the total machine hours for product A. Product B, they're going to produce 2,000 units and each unit requires 6 machine hours. So we multiply by 6. Product C, they're going to produce 1,600 units. Each unit you multiply by, it requires 4 machine hours. You multiply by 4. And product D, they are 400 units, you multiply by 6. So when you do that computation, it's going to be 52,000 hours. So the overhead absorption rate is going to be 1040,000. You divide by 52,000. So that one is going to give you shillings 20 per hour. So this is going to be our overhead absorption rate per hour under the traditional method. So here we are going to determine the total cost. So we have product A. We are going to determine we have product A, B, C, and D. So the total cost, they want us to determine the cost per unit of each product, cost per unit. So the cost, we said, for a product, we're going to determine the total cost of making that product. The total cost, we say, is a composition of material cost, labor, and overhead. So here we're going to get the material cost. So how are we going to get the material cost? For product A, we have been told the direct material per unit is 40 shillings. So we're going to multiply 40 times 2,000. We're going to multiply 40 times 2,000. 40 times 2,000. 40 shillings is for 1 unit. And then for the total number of units is 40 times 2,000. That one will give you 96,000 shillings. So this one will give you 96,000. That is the material cost for product A. Or that is the total cost for all the 2,000 units. 2,400, sorry. Product B, they are producing 2,000 units. Each unit requires 50 shillings. Material cost per unit is 50. So we're going to multiply 2,000 times 50. That one will give you 100,000. It will give you 100,000. That is the material cost, product B. Product C, they are producing 1,600 units. Each unit requires 30 shillings per unit. So 30 times, so we're going to multiply 30 here. 30 times 1,600. So that one will give you 48,000. So here it will be 48,000. Product D, they are producing 2,400, and the labor cost, material cost per unit is 60. You multiply by 60. So this one is going to give you 144,000. That is there. And then we have the labor cost. Labor cost here. Labor cost, product A per unit is 28 shillings per unit. So it's going to be 28. It's going to be 28 times 2,400. So this one is 67,200. This one is going to be 67,200. And then the next one is 21 times 2,000. So 21 times 2,000, that one will give you 42,000. So this one will be equivalent to 42,000. Product C, you're going to multiply 14 times 1,600. 14 times 1,600. 14 times 1,600, which is 22,400. And then product D, it is going to be, product D is going to be 21 again times 2,400. So that one is going to be 5,400. 5,400. And then now we have overheads. Overhead, we have determined the absorption rate is 20 shillings per hour, machine hours. So for product A, we're going to determine the total machine hours, and then we multiply by 20. Product B, we're going to determine the total machine hours, and then we multiply by 20. So the overheads here for product A, the total machine hours is 2,400 times 8, 2,400 times 8, and then you multiply by 20. That one is going to be 384,000. 384,000. That is, we have multiplied 2,400 here. We have multiplied by 8. This one will give us the total machine hours, and then we multiply by 20 to get that one. Product B, it will be 2,000 units. You multiply by 6 to get the total machine hours, which is 12, and then you multiply by 20. That one is going to give you 240,000. Product C, you're going to multiply 1,600 times 4, which is 6,400. You multiply by 20. This is 128,000. This is 128,000. And then this is 2,400. You multiply by 6, and then you multiply by 20. This is going to give you 288,000. And then you're going to add them downward. You're going to add them to get the total cost. Total cost. Total cost. So you're going to get the total cost for product A. We're going to get the total cost. Product A, this is going to be 96,000 plus 67,200. So this one is 547,200. So this one is going to be 382,000. So this is 198,400. So the cost per unit, the cost per unit for 5,700, you divide by 2,400. And this is 382,000, you divide by 2,000. So this one is going to be shillings 228 per unit. This is going to be shillings 191. So that is the overhead cost. That is the total cost per unit of the products using the traditional methods. Traditional methods. Question? Any question so far on the same? Anything that is not clear? So that we can clarify anything that is not clear. So I repeat, for overhead, the traditional, you must have the total overheads. And then we have the base. The base is the method of absorption. This question was machine hours. Take the total overhead over the machine hours, you get the rates. Now, for the overheads for each and every product will be the number of machine hours the product consumed times this, that is the overhead cost. Then you add the material cost, labor cost, and then you get there. So we want to do what we call activity-based costing. Activity-based costing. So activity-based costing. Activity-based costing now. So we are going to do activity-based costing. Activity-based costing, ABC. So activity-based costing. So under ABC, we have what you call the cost driver rates. Cost driver rates. So which is going to be overheads over the cost driver. Cost driver. So we have the overhead over the cost driver. So the first overhead here, the first overhead, the first activity. So overheads must be divided based on the activity. So the first activity here, we have what we call machine hours. Machine machining, not machine hours. We have an activity called machining hours. So the overhead over number of machine hours, number of machine hours. So here we're going to determine overhead is already given. So number of machine hours here, number of machine hours, already we have done that. So number of machine hours, number of machine hours. So product A, you have been told it requires product A. Product A requires 2,400 units. You multiply by 8. Product B is equals to 2,000. You multiply by 6. This is the machine hours per unit. And then product C, 1,600. And then you multiply by 4. Then product D, we have 2,400. You multiply by 6. So that will give you the total machine hours. That will give you the total machine hours. The first one will be 19,200. This one will be 19,200. The second one will be 12,000. The third one will be 6,400. And the lastly, it will be 14,400. So the total here will be 52,000 machine hours. So the overhead rate, so the overhead absorption rate here, overhead absorption rate is going to be, overhead absorption rate is going to be the total overheads, which is 417,200. So here we have 417,200. You divide by 52,000. So this one is going to give you 8 shillings, 8.02. That is number one. Number two, we have number of production setup. Setup is the second one. Setup. So here we have overheads over number of production run, number of production runs. So we get the number of production run here, number of production runs. We get the number of production runs. Number of production runs. We have been told the products are manufactured in production runs of 10 units. So in other words, 10 units equivalent to 1 run. What about if 10 units is equivalent to 1 run? What about if you're producing 2,400 units? How many runs would that be? So we are going to divide. So the first one is going to be, A is going to be 2,400. We divide by 10. This one is going to be 240. The second one will be 2,000. We divide by 10. This is going to be 200. The second one is 1,600. We divide by 10. This is 160. And lastly, D, that one is going to be 2,400. You divide by 10, which is going to be 240. So the total is 840. So that is the number of runs. So overhead absorption rate here, overhead absorption rate is going to be 210,000. You divide by 840. So that one is going to give you, you divide by 840, that one is going to give you 250 shillings per run. 250 shillings per run. That is 250 per run. And then we have number three. Number three, we have what we call the second overhead. The second activity there is store receiving. Stores receiving. Stores receiving. So overhead absorption rate is going to be overhead over number of requisition, number of requisition. Overhead over the number of requisition. Overhead over the number of requisition. So number of requisition here, number of requisition for product A, we've been told in note number 4, the requisition rates during the months were 20 units for each product. So in other words, one requisition is equivalent to 20 units. What about 2,400 units? So it's going to be product A, it's going to be 2,400 units. We divide by 20. Product B is going to be 2,000 units. We divide by 20. Product C is going to be 1,600. Divide by 20. And product D is going to be 2,400. Divide by 20. Divide by 20. So this one 120. This is going to be 120. This one is 120, 100, 80, and then 120. So this one is going to be, the total is going to be 420. So here we're going to have 420. So overhead absorption rate is going to be, the total overheads, which is 144,000 over 420. So that is going to be there. So that is going to be 342 shillings, 342.85 per requisition. The next activity after that is number 4 here. We're going to do what we call inspection. Inspection, which is going to be overhead of a number of production run. So we have been given this one, we have been doing the cost drivers. We have been given the cost drivers over the production run. So the overheads here, overheads is 84,000. 84,000. Already we have determined the number of production run, which is 840. So we're going to multiply by, we're going to divide by 840. So that one will give us 840. That one will give us 100 shillings per run. So this one is going to be 100 shillings per run. Lastly, we have material handling. Material handling is going to be overhead over orders executed. Orders executed. So here we're going to determine number of orders executed. Number of orders executed. So we've been told orders, in note number 4, orders executed were in the batches of 10. So in other words, 10 units equal to 1 execution. What about 2,400? What about 2,400? What about 2,400? So the same thing is going to happen here. So it's going to be 2,400 divided by 10, which is 240. Then 2,000, this is product A. Product B divided by 10, this is going to be 200. Product C, 1,600 divided by 10, 160. And product D is going to be 2,400 divided by 10, which is going to be 240. Total 840. So overhead absorption rate is going to be the total overhead, which is 184, 800 divided by 840. So that one will give you, that is going to give you, this one is going to give you, I hope you can be able to understand. This is going to give you 220. This one is going to give you shillings 220. So we come here and determine the total cost. So we have product A, product B, product C, and product D. So here we have the material cost. Material cost. Remember, this one we had already determined. It was 96,000 earlier on. We had already determined here. So you're going to determine the total cost of the product. So we had product A, it was 96,000. Product B was 100,000. And then this one was 48,000. And this was 144,000. That was the material cost. That was material cost for each product. And then we have direct labor cost. Labor cost. Labor cost, we had 67,200. And then this one was, the next one was 42,000. The next one was 22,400. And lastly, 50,400. And then here we're going to have overheads. We're going to have overheads. So the first is we are going to determine the overheads here. So the first overhead here is machining. Machining. So we said the rate is 8.02. You're going to multiply by 19,200 for product A. Product B, this one times this. This one times this, this times this. So that is what you're going to multiply. So you're going to multiply this one, 19,200 times this one. So that is the machining. That is the machining cost. The machining cost for product A, it will be 19,200, the total machine for product A, and then you multiply by 8.02. So this one is going to give you 153. So this one is going to give you 153,984. The second one here, you're going to multiply 12,000 times 8.02. This one is going to give you 96,240. 96,240. And the next one, you're going to multiply this times 8.2. That one is 51,328. 51,328. You're going to multiply this times this. This one's going to be 115,488. 115,488. The next activity is setup. Setup. Setup, you're going to multiply 250 times 240. 250 here times 240. You get this one. So setup, the first one will be 60,000. So this one we're going to give you 60,000. The second one, you're going to multiply 200 times 250. That one is going to give you 60,000, 100,000, this one. This one is going to give you 100,000. This one is going to give you 40,000. And this one is going to give you 30,000. That is setup. And then the next one is stores receiving. Stores receiving. Stores receiving, we are going to multiply this value here times 120. 342.85 times 120. This is going to give us 41142.84. The next one, you're going to multiply 100 times 342. So it's going to be 342, 85.7. The next one is 27,428. 27,428.56. And lastly is going to be 411. So that is store receiving. And then we have inspection. Inspection, we have 2,400. 2,400. We have, so you're going to multiply 100 times 240. That is the total number of production run for product A. So the next one will be 20,000. 16,000, and then 24,000. Lastly, we are going to do the material handling. Material handling. So for material handling, we are going to have 220 here. This one you're going to multiply by 240. So the first one will give us 52,800. We're going to multiply this one, the rate times the total number of orders executed for each and every product. So the total number of orders executed for product B is 200. So it's going to be 220 multiplied by 200. That was going to give us 44,000. Product C is going to be 160 times 220. That is 35,200. And for that product D, it's going to be 240 times 220, which is 52,800. So here we're going to get the total cost. Total cost. We're going to add and get the total cost. The total cost. So this one is going to be 49,495. You're adding everything, material, labor, and overheads. 495, 126.54. And then this one is going to be 436, 525.7. Then this is 240, 356.56. This one is going to be 487, 830.84. 487, 830.84. So that's the total cost. So they want the cost per unit. This is the total cost. This is the total cost. This is the total cost. That is material, labor, and overheads. So you're going to get the cost per unit. The cost per unit. So the cost per unit here, you're going to take this one, 495, 126. You divide by 2,400 units. Here you get the cost per unit. So this is 436. So you're going to do that. The first one is going to give us 206.3. This is 206.3 per unit. The second one is going to give us 218.26. 218.26. And the third one is going to give us 150.22. And lastly, is going to give 203.26. So that is the activity-based costing. That is the activity-based costing. So each and every activity will be allocated its overhead. So you determine the cost driver rate, which is the overheads for activity over the cost driver. The first activity was the machining. The overheads that was allocated here was 417,200. So we determine the machining, the machine hours for each and every product. So product A was 19,200, product B 12,000, product C 6,400, product D 14,400. So these are the total number of units that were produced for product A, and we've been told each product required 8 machine hours. So you multiply 2,400 times 8 in order to get the total machine hours. You add all the machine hours, you get the total machine hours 52. The overhead absorption rate is going to be 52,000. So it's going to be 417,200 over 52,000. So it's 808. So now for overhead, for this overhead cost, it's going to be this rate times the total machine hours of each product. This one we're going to give us this figure here. 12,000 you multiply by 8.02, it's going to give us this figure. So you multiply like that across, you get the total overhead for each machining for product A, B, C, and D. The second one was the setup. The overhead allocated for setup was 210,000 according to the question. And then the cost driver here, according to the question, was number of production run. So then product A, the total runs were 240. Product B, the total runs were 200. So we add all the runs, and then we come here and divide back. We take the total overhead over the total number of runs, 250. So for overhead, it's going to be 250 times this 240. We get this 60,000. So that is how we absorb overhead based on the activity-based costing. Any question? That is how we absorb overhead based on the activity-based costing. So this is 2011 question number. So now you will attempt for me, you'll do this one at your own free time. November 2019. You attempt May 2019 question number. May 2019 question number 3B. Attempt May 2019. May 2019 question number 3B. In case you have difficulties, you are unable to do it, please, you notify me immediately so that I can direct you on how we can do it. So attempt May 2019 question number 3B if you find time, many others. So that one will bring us to the end of the revision of that particular area of activity-based costing.